Hi, this is Ross Nickerson, and welcome to your DVD banjo instruction, How to Practice. I'm really excited to share some of the things I've learned over the year with banjo workshops and giving private lessons to help you build your skill and get more out of your practice time. Knowing what to practice on the banjo and making the best use of your practice time could ultimately be the defining factor in how much skill you develop and how far your banjo playing comes along. It's really important that you make the right choices in practice and work very hard at the things that will move you forward and help you reach your goals. Often students will ask me how long it will take them to learn how to play the banjo, and it's a difficult question for me to answer. It's usually a matter of hours, not years, and or time spent. It's also how well your time is spent when you practice, and how hard you push yourself, and how much you work on the things that are important for you to work on to keep moving forward. One of the simplest things to remember when you're practicing is to practice what you can't play. It sounds, like I said, a bit simplistic, but if you always work on things that are difficult for you, the weakest spot in the song, or any kind of thing that you feel is a weak part of your playing, then you'll have the best chance of overcoming that if you gravitate towards the hard stuff. I've outlined many things to cover in the video. I'm going to have them in different chapters and talk about some really important things, and things that I know that will be issues for you if you're learning banjo. Things like memorizing songs, learning songs from tab, how to practice the left hand and the right hand, how to learn a song more quickly, and all kinds of things that I've thought about and that I've written about in my book, The Banjo Encyclopedia. So I'm really anxious to share these things for you. I'll do the best I can here on the video. I'm not an actor, I'm a banjo teacher, but I'll do my best, and I'm trying to keep this upbeat and keep it interesting for you so you can learn a lot. Knowing what to practice and making the best use of your practice time, again, like I said earlier in the video, it could ultimately define your skill level and how far you progress with the banjo. Just a couple of things that off the top of my head that would make the most sense is what I said earlier, which was practicing what you can't play, but also choosing the things that will help you to build skill and working on techniques in your banjo playing rather than working on songs and maybe spending too much time going over tablature and just trying to memorize things. If you build skill in your playing and you build technique, you'll have all kinds of things to fall back on when you're learning these songs. And songs can come rather quickly once you learn how to play the banjo. And I mean play the banjo, that's really what you want to learn and practice, is how to play the banjo. You can learn songs later, and you can learn all kinds of things. But if you have the skill right there at your fingertips, things come much quicker. When you practice, it builds confidence, and confidence is very important when you play the banjo. One of the things that trip up people the most when they're playing is really just to get anxiety about whether or not they can do something that they're trying to do. And when you practice and you build skill, it helps you to relax when you play. And relaxing when you play on the banjo is probably, could be boiled down to the most important thing. You want to be playing when you're performing or playing a song on the banjo. You want to be playing at a level that is comfortable for you, which in my way of seeing things, you want to have more skill than you need to play the song that you're playing. In other words, if you were very comfortable with the left-hand parts of the song coming up and the picking, say for instance, you played at a speed that was below the fastest speed you could play, that's going to help relax you, and that really, really makes a huge difference when you're playing banjo if you can relax. Working on your banjo playing technique instead of working too much on songs is something that comes up a lot. I think it would be sensible for you to probably work 70–80% of your practice time on building up your skills and building up your ability to play songs, and then spend the rest of your time learning songs. And it might be okay if you're just starting on the banjo to really put a lot of time into working up the proper technique of playing banjo before you try to learn too many songs. I know that's the way I learned when I began. I was kind of fortunate that way. When I learned to play the banjo, I was able to take a few banjo lessons, and then I couldn't At that time, I just got my driver's license, and I couldn't get the car to drive to the banjo lessons. So I only was able to take 3 banjo lessons. And in those banjo lessons, I learned a couple of rolls. I learned the alternating thumb roll. I learned the reverse roll. And then I also learned a little bit of Cumberland Gap and some Cripple Creek and a couple of chords. So that's really about all I had, and that's what most people learn in their first few lessons. And I didn't have it written down, but I remembered enough of it that I was on my way with it. But one of the advantages to that was I was able to practice those few things and practice them really hard for a longer period of time without getting too involved with learning new songs and moving on to too much of a tablature overload. What I did then was practice the couple of rolls that I had and practice chord changing, and I got where I could play the rolls fast, and I was getting a good tone out of them. And then I'd use the few licks that I knew, and I'd use them playing around the chord progressions. One of the things that I feel it's important to tell students when I do banjo workshops and banjo lessons is that learning the banjo is much more of a physical challenge than a mental challenge. In other words, I don't have any doubt that you'll mentally be able to understand how to play, but physically being able to achieve the skill that you need to play these songs up to speed and to become a good banjo player, it's more like going to the gym than it is like going to science class, for instance. I know when I learned to play the banjo, and still when I practice now, I'm very aggressive with my practice. I really get to work and work on things, and it's probably one of the reasons I can play as well as I can, because I've always approached it that way. But over time, I've noticed that not all students approach it that way, and I've learned that maybe I'm fortunate or unique in that way, and so that I want to share that so that I can help you to go about it maybe a little more aggressively so you can keep moving forward. Something else that comes up a lot in giving lessons and workshops and making friends with my banjo students, especially the adult ones, they say, "Oh, I wish I was young," or "I wish I'd taken up when I was younger." And then I'm sure that there would be some advantages to that, but I'd just like to point out a couple of the advantages that may help you to have some insight into learning quicker as an adult. One of the things that kids do when they learn is I think when you're younger you have less fear of making mistakes, and you're naturally more aggressive about learning. You're not as afraid to make a bad sound, and you're being more careful. As adults, we know that we have to be careful. If we're not careful backing out of the driveway in the morning, we might get into an accident. We've got to pay our bills on time. Life becomes very different. When you're young, you have the freedom to be a little more reckless, and that recklessness, when you're learning a musical instrument, can really come in handy. An example of being aggressive when you practice, it maybe just be something as simple as just taking the banjo and just taking it and just kind of shaking it and just not being afraid of it, picking it up and going like this with it or something along those lines, or taking your hand and running up and down the neck, making noises. Whatever you have to do to get so where you're feeling you're in control rather than the banjo sort of behind the banjo. I have experience flying airplanes, and I used to flight instruct, and was very interested in flying. I'm not flying right now, but one of the things I remember when I learned with flying airplanes was you always want to stay ahead of the airplane. You never want to get the airplane get ahead of you, or the airplane flying you, as you might the expression might go. So the same goes for the banjo. You really want to get control of that instrument, and don't let it be the boss of you.